Hello, listeners. Mallory Wilsey here, Chief Producer of the Enrollify Network. So, everyone is talking about AI these days, but not enough people are taking the time to unpack how AI will impact the future of higher education. And that's why we launched the Generation AI podcast, co hosted by Artis Cadu, CEO of Element 451, and JC Bonilla, Chief Data Officer at VaynerMedia. Artis and JC have worked on large language models for nearly 2 decades and have remarkable technical knowledge around how they work and how generative AI will impact the future of higher ed. Generation AI isn't just about understanding artificial intelligence, it's about being part of the AI revolution in education. Tune in, get informed, and be inspired to innovate in your educational space with the power of artificial intelligence. You can subscribe to the show by visiting podcast.enrollify.org or just search Generation AI wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to Talking Tactics, a podcast that gets you results. Each episode features a single tactic implemented with limited resources that moved the needle in enrollment in some way. I'm your host, Day Kibbles, Strategy Director at Ology, a marketing and branding agency for education. Join me every other week for discussions with some of the most clever folks in admissions and enrollment marketing, doing the work day to day, just like you. Talking Tactics is a part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites, linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered, all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Check them out at element451.com. Hey friends, and welcome back to Talking Tactics. Today's episode is very ingenious, and I cannot wait for you to learn from our guest, Cade Scott. Cade, as a partner to First Class Dental Assisting School of Nashville, took enrollment from 0 to a full class in just one cycle by using AI to respond to every application within 5 minutes. His, what he calls speed to lead idea, turned 1 in every 2 applicants into committed students. Cade is the founder of Enroll Boost AI, working as Director of Marketing and Enrollment with First Class Dental Assisting School of Nashville. That's a mouthful. And comes to higher ed with over a decade of expertise in storytelling and marketing. Welcome to the show, Cade.
Thank you. That was the best podcast intro I think I've gotten yet. No shade on anyone else, but that was awesome.
Well, I do write it down so I don't mess it up. So,
and you're right. The name is quite the mouthful.
It is.
I can't take credit for the name. That you'll have to talk to our director about.
I wonder if there is like an acronym. It's like FCDASN. That doesn't help. That doesn't help.
It doesn't spell
the I guess it's a dental school, so it can be a mouthful.
Yeah, exactly.
That's my joke. That's
oh yeah, there it is. There's the pun. I got it.
You got it. Let's talk about the First Class Dental Assisting School of Nashville and what your role was there and kind of what you were hired to help them do at the very beginning of this whole idea.
The director there was starting this school. He was doing it because he's a dentist in the area and he was hiring dental assistants from other schools and colleges and accelerated programs that were not prepared for the job. Something about the curriculum, something about the instruction from these other schools just wasn't preparing them for the real world, the real role once you got out of school. And so he's like, you know what, I'm going to start my own school and train them dental assistants in the area in the way that, is good for the
job.
Role. Yeah. And so he's like any small business. He tasked me with gaining some traction, with finding some customers. He knew I was in marketing. He's actually my cousin-in-law, but we were connected through that way and was like, hey, I will do everything else if you can get people in the door.
Classic marketing task. Just find the people.
Post a couple times on Instagram and see what happens. The mission was great, right? It was needed. There was a need in the Nashville community for a school that trained dental assistants in the way they needed to be trained. But how do you convince students of that and actually get them in the door when your competitors have 300 5-star reviews or have been there for 20 plus years? And here's us trying to raise our hand in the midst of this noise, saying, "Hey, we have a better service. We come on in. We can help," with no proof. So that was the task, and I think even a challenge, a tactic for another podcast, if I don't pitch myself again, of how to actually gain traction as a small business and a new trade school. But we got to a point where just using different methods, mainly digital methods, where applications were coming in, which was a win, which was great. That was partial weight off my shoulders of like, all right, let me just get applications in.
It's
right?
working. Something's working.
Yes, at least it's not just completely nothing, But what I was finding was we could get applications in, but we couldn't convert those applications into actual students. What would happen is someone would apply, and at first I would send a generic email that was like, "Hey, you're accepted. Please come to school. Put down $1,000." And ghost. We would get no engagement from there. So I was like, okay, well, what if we, instead of sending out a generic email and trying to get them to impulse commit to a school for $1,000, that we, after they applied, put on a calendar link and said, "Hey, just meet us, get to know us. We'll get to know you. We'll build a relationship, and we'll pitch our service to you, and we'll try to see if we're a good fit for you and you're a good fit for us." And that worked to an extent where people were scheduling these meetings with us, but were no showing. I didn't get one person to show. And I was like, how is that possible?
You're like inching along. You're like, okay, I got the appointment, but
we were less wrong than we were yesterday, but we're still wrong, like it's like I got the appointment, but I can't get anyone to show up to the appointment. Like something is happening from their initial application to 1 to 2 days later where they just decide, I'm not going to engage in conversation. I've lost interest in that school for whatever reason. And so I was a little stumped. I was like, what is going on? How are we going to get people in? Is it hopeless?
So you're inching them along. You're seeing some success, but they were not quite converting yet. So what did you try next? What was this idea that you had to actually get them to convert?
Here's what I did. I like this quote in particular, that success leaves patterns. And so what I did was like, okay, let me apply to dental assisting schools that seem to be successfully enrolling students, so much so that they're expanding across states. That's the ones that I looked at, and seeing like, what's their enrollment process look like? Even other trade schools like that seem to be successfully enrolling students, what does their enrollment process look like? Can I pick up on any patterns that we could emulate at our school? And I noticed a trend. I started to notice a trend with what seemed to be successful trade schools just around the nation. And that was, as soon as I would apply, and I'm sorry to all the
Hey, this is market research. Market research.
There, in the name of market research, I applied, and I picked up on the pattern that as soon as that application was submitted, I would get text, call, and an email. And these texts and calls and email weren't your generic, "We received your application, thank you, someone will be in touch." They were an actual human, let's say, on the other side saying, "Hey, I see you just applied. That's wonderful.
Ooh.
Are you free right now?
All right.
Let's talk about school." And I was like, let me try this. So the next application that came in, a minute later, I jumped on it. I sent a text and an email that we already had kind of automatic emails sending out. And I altered the email a bit to be more personal. And I figured out that was part of the key. But I texted and I said, "Hey, this is Cade. Thank you for applying. I'm the, enrollment person here at First Class Dental Assisting School of Nashville. Hey, what prompted you to apply? Like what prompted you to reach out to us? And I received
Ooh,
a text back,
we're
a
making
response, and
progress.
an engagement, a conversation. We're inching along, right? And so I then was like, great, that's awesome. They have their different reasons. Maybe it's the speed at which, like, it's 10 weeks. That's awesome. I can still work. It's 1 day a week. I can still work and go to
Mm-hmm.
school. Or it's, I was trying to plug the newness as our differentiator too, of like, oh, I just really like that, it's
Mm-hmm.
taught by a dentist and you're preparing people for the role, and awesome, that sounds great. What
Mm-hmm.
interests you about dental assisting? Then they would respond to that, and then I would say, hey, 10, ask them another question, stay curious. And it got to a point, 10, 12 texts later, where I was like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
come in for a tour, come to meet us, come get a feel for where you might be learning. Lo and behold, that person came in for a tour,
Oh,
loved it, became our
yay.
first student. And so I was like,
That's great.
okay,
Something worked, but
something worked here.
I mean,
So
it worked. It was
yeah,
awesome, but I'm thinking about a conversation that intimate and 12 text messages back and forth with every applicant. That can get challenging, right? So I'm
yes,
guessing this is where you went next. You're like, how do I do this at scale? So how did you do it at scale?
that's when I discovered that speed to lead, how quickly I could follow up with an application, was the difference between losing a student and enrolling a student. And yes, it came to a point where it was a good problem to have, where yes, applications were coming in, but I couldn't have that level of a conversation that fast or that deep of a conversation with every applicant, especially if there were multiple at a time, or if they applied at midnight when I was asleep, which a
Yeah,
lot
that's
of
when
students
you,
actually
especially I'm
did.
thinking of like, adults with jobs, like that's when you're thinking about
Yeah,
your future and you're making impulse decisions. And for
yeah,
your students, your applicants are doing something
yeah.
good. I'm like shopping for crap on Instagram. That's my impulse decision at midnight. So yeah, so what happens to those if you can't respond to them right away?
I lose them, and that was the heartbreaking thing, was like, if I couldn't respond to you between my day job and respond to you right away and have that level of conversation, I mean, I could chalk it up as it was a guaranteed loss.
I just can't believe that. Wow. That's incredible.
I can't either. Well, that's maybe a logical question, because I started to ask myself, once I came to terms with, like, okay, speed to lead is so important, and that instant personalized engagement is so important. Why is that? Like, what, and I think of it from a customer experience level, I guess. If I'm on your website and I want your service, and I trust you enough to fill out a form, you can know that in that moment, one, that I've probably done a lot of research on you and trusted you enough to give you my information. So I'm interested in you. But two, there's depending on the service, that pain point is painful enough, or I'm excited enough to act on it, that I'm gone out and done research and now I'm looking at things. And so I, and there's data out here to support this, if you can capitalize on that interest when it's at its peak, which is when I'm on your website and submitting a form, then I am probably more apt to have a conversation with you, at least to begin the conversation with you in that moment. And if you can do that first and quickly, one, it shows that I think that you're putting your best foot forward, you're professional. And two, it starts a conversation before, at least from a trade school perspective, before your competition
Right.
can. Or maybe it gives you that chance at a first impression before
And you know what? That's
your
a great point
competition
because
can.
they're probably doing this on multiple sites, right? Like they're comparing,
Yes.
they're weighing options, and if you're the very first one to respond, I too have read some research in particular, like in the graduate enrollment world and adult learners, right, which is a same audience really we're talking
Mm.
about. Like speed is crucial. If you are the first
Yeah.
you are going to get that enrolled student. And this, I just
Yeah.
find it so cool that you were able to run these experiments for yourself in such like a clear cut way that you were like, yeah, if I do it, we get them. If I don't, we don't. I think that's so cool.
Oh, thank you. To go back to that, like, it makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense, right? If you can, and there's a lot of, like you said, research out there that shows that, and especially as once I discovered this, I found the research, and the term "speed to lead" was a part
Mhm.
of a research study
Mhm.
that was done,
Mhm.
and so I kind of adopted that term of like, oh yeah, it makes complete sense as a you could use that as a differentiator, but it's a differentiator because no one else, and I hope no one from the Nashville area, and if
You'll
you
be
do,
even
great,
faster,
like
Cade.
try it. You'll be, yeah, I'll make sure it's even faster. No, the average time trade schools get back to you, at least in our area, and then as I kind of continue to audit and apply to these different places, it could range anywhere from a few hours to
Yeah.
multiple days. And at that point, if I've already had, multiple touch points with a
Oh yeah.
certain school or a certain company,
You're nurtured. You're
it's
ready. Yeah.
it's impossible. Yeah, I'm nurtured.
Yeah.
I'm an advocate of whatever, company that has already
Yeah.
nurtured that relationship. So it's remarkable to me how rare speed to lead is. And I maybe there is a couple of reasons to that. Um, but if people just focused on having instant personalized conversations, how much of a
Yeah.
difference that could make.
Hey, it's Mallory, Chief Strategist of Enrollify. Why travel far when an exceptional higher ed conference experience awaits from the comfort of your campus or home office? I'm thrilled to announce that every single session at the 2024 Engage Summit will be live streamed. And the best part? Registration is free. Many of your favorite Enrollify creators are presenting. Maya Demishkovich and Jenny Lee Fowler will teach you how to craft an AI-powered social media influencer strategy. Jamie Hunt will help you unlock the AI revolution in your team. And Shane Baglini and Allison Tercio are teaming up to boost your productivity with generative AI. Plan out your dream conference by scoping out the agenda and taking note of the sessions you want to tune in for. Visit engage.element451.com and register yourself and your team for free today. Now, back to the show.
Let's talk about that because I think some people might be listening to this being like, well, yeah, my system sends an automatic, immediate email confirming receipt of the application. So are we doing it right? And that's not quite it, right? Because you are throwing the word personalized in there. And I think that's what's really important. So talk to us about how you made how you made that possible. It's not just the immediacy, it's a relevant personal response.
Yes.
So how did you do that?
So how do we do this at scale? That's the thing. Kind of an
Yeah,
application called
it's a
Zapier.
connector
Um,
almost.
and I knew, yep, a connector, and I knew it could
Yeah.
automate. It's an automation tool, so it could automate different tasks and connect different applications. And I said, well, what if I connect it to my CRM, and ChatGPT, so that I could set up a workflow where as soon as an application came in, it would send a prompt through Zapier to ChatGPT to have a conversation with the student. I have this kind of pre-formatted kind of template text that I send to every application. And as soon as the student responds, it sends that response to ChatGPT. ChatGPT reads it. It responds back as if it's me, Cade, the enrollment person at First Class Dental Assisting School of Nashville, sends that response back through Zapier and then to the student, and we go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth.
Wow.
And that's how I was able to, ChatGPT was able to not only have an immediate conversation, but
Yeah.
a personal conversation because of that connection, because it's a chatbot, because it's a
Yeah.
chat application.
For the folks who are like tech savvy listening, you've heard of Zapier before. You're not intimidated by this at all, right? But it's not, you don't need to code, right? Like you're just, it's very simple actually to
No,
set this up if you're unafraid of technology, right?
you don't need to know how to code or create your own AI or anything like that. You just need to know how to use. I wouldn't even say just Zapier. I'm sure there's another way to do this, but that's what I used. You just need to know how to connect tools together, connect applications together.
The cool thing about Zapier is that it does work with almost all CRMs in higher ed. So,
Hmm.
thinking about keeping talking tactics, implementable tactics, what are you telling it to say?
The way I prompt ChatGPT, and there's a whole kind of like technical setup side that happens in the CRM. So Zapier and ChatGPT knows to respond to the message that's coming in. But the way I prompt ChatGPT is, I like to think of it as if I were to hire a new enrollment officer to come in or admissions advisor to come in and respond to every application, I would give them some parameters. I would give them, hey, here's your main goal of the conversation. Here's the conversation, what it should flow, what you should cover. Here's some information about the school. Um, Go and conquer. Go do it. It's almost the same thing with ChatGPT, maybe even a bit more prescriptive. Imagine it as a clean slate. Like it doesn't have any prior experience. It's just a little kid you need to give exact kind of orders to. But in the same way you would give like a framework and a script maybe to a new admissions advisor, is the same kind of idea to ChatGPT. And then refine and iterate from there once you see responses come in. So that's what I've done. So it's programmed to respond to each message within the technical side. You show it the response, and that response is dynamic depending on what the student says. You want to keep this response to 2 to 3 sentences. Your response. You, I learned quickly. You don't want to use emojis. You don't want to repeat their name over and over again.
That
You don't,
don't make
all
it,
the
yeah,
things that
like
like make you
ChatGPT.
sound
Yeah.
AI. Don't do. Yeah.
Yeah.
You respond, and then, hey, here's the tone you should respond in. You're again, you give it a little, like a human would know this, but you give it a little bit more prescription. You're empathetic, you're caring, you want to respond to their response, and before you ask your question. And when you always ask an open-ended question, don't ask a yes no question. Here's an example of a question, of the first couple questions that you should ask each student. And then we get into the flow of conversation. Once they answer those questions, then ask if they have any questions about the school. And depending on what they ask, here's your knowledge base. And then once they don't have any more questions, your goal is to tell them that, hey, you can expect an acceptance email here soon. Let's come in for a tour. What days and times work for you? And then it's natural conclusion. The conversation ends.
Wow. It's making me think of the days of like creating phone scripts for admission counselors. It's exactly that,
Yeah.
basically.
You're giving it a talk track is what you're giving it. And it, just like a human would, it's taking its own liberties, its creative liberties, and you can control those liberties as much as you want within that prompt. You could just feed it a script and say, do not deviate from this. But I like how it responds. It responds differently to every student and but it still sticks to those parameters, that framework, and follows the same conversational flow. And its main goal is to close them on the next step, which is a tour.
One of the first questions I think folks will have is are there any privacy concerns? Like is the ChatGPT or is Zapier using any data from the student's record that the student wouldn't want to be used? Or are you keeping the information, like maybe just like that conversation is just about the next step?
That conversation is just about the next step. So you can control what Zapier and ChatGPT receive. You can control what information you're sending to it. At least I can within the CRM. And so no like sensitive student information is being asked for or being pushed to
That's how you keep
ChatGPT.
it safe, right?
And within the parameters of a first conversation to say, what interests you about the school? What questions do you have? Let's take a tour together. That's all that's kind of happening.
Were there any challenges that you faced trying to implement this?
Besides having no technical background and
Y-
trying to figure it
y-
out on the fly, technically, yeah, the setup aspect of it. But well, I say no coding, but I also like the extent of my tech background was maybe running some Facebook or Google ads, So I had to learn Zapier, learn the CRM, learn ChatGPT and prompt engineering to make it all flow. But there's an abundance of resources out there if you want to learn that.
I always joke that, especially like our generation, right? If the most important skill we have is to learn to Google. If you can Google well
Yes.
and you know where to find stuff, like I have built incredible things. I remember like one of my first jobs on like Microsoft Access, which who's using that anymore? Because of Google. Like I don't know how to code in like Microsoft VBA, but Google
Yeah.
does. Anyway.
Yeah.
And now
And now
exactly.
ChatGPT
So
might. But
so let's talk about the results, Cade, because I know like all this build up, people are like, okay, we get it. It's amazing. I want to try. What did you see? What in the end, enrollment wise, what were the results of implementing this?
like 0 to 100%. That's why you'll see me on hopefully you'll see me on LinkedIn posting all the time about you need to be quick when answering applications and you need to be personalized because there's something, and we've talked about, there's something in that first conversation where if you can be quick and you can be personalized, that seems, and you have, let's say you've solved the problem of applications coming in, because I know there's a lot of small business owners, small trade schools that not only need to convert applications, but need applications. So if you have applications coming in, but you're not hitting your enrollment numbers, if you just implement speed and personalization at scale, it could be the difference. I believe it can be the difference. I would love to know if it is the difference for people that implement it.
Yeah. I mean, you saw it. You saw it happen. And you saw it with a lot of trial and error. When you don't do it, it doesn't happen. When you do it, it does happen. And like that's a perfect test, right? And going from a 0 to 100%, like that's so telling, right? Have you learned anything since the first since the first cycle? Like have you made any improvements or changes to your model
Yeah,
since?
so that's the next challenge, right? Is the challenge that I wanted to touch on was like you do have to refine it. Like you don't know, your first prompt will not be your last prompt. You put into what you think will work, and then you watch ChatGPT ask too many questions, and you say, okay, like
Stop.
stop
You're being
asking,
weird.
stop. Yes, that's where. There's a funny story where there was one applicant who was like, "Hey, not to be rude or anything, but can we please move on to like I have a few questions that I want to ask." And so I had to
Oh my god.
refine the prompt back. They still came as a student, but they just thought that Cade was
Oh my
this
god.
person who
Cade
never
is so
stopped
weird.
asking questions. Or used too many emojis, or was like, "Hey, use your name." Like, "Hey, Cade, that's a great question, Cade." Well, actually, Cade, it's like, stop. Okay, like, how to win friends and
Yeah.
influence people. Maybe that's what you're drawing on and you're just trying to use the name, but now it's just like, it just seems creepy,
It's just
seems like a
awkward.
robot. So, you have to then go in and say, don't use their name every message, like only ask
Yeah.
these two questions, or, if they ask a question, stop asking questions. And, like that kind of thing you don't know until you see ChatGPT in action. And now it's at a point
Yeah.
where I used to kind of cringe when I first started. And now it's at a point where the prompt, I feel confident that anyone that applies, it's like, yep, they got it. And it's just a matter of, have I trained it on enough information that any question that thrown
Mhm.
out there isn't going to throw ChatGPT off? And you can prompt that
Mhm.
into, where it's like, if you don't know the answer to a question, you just say, I don't
Just
know,
don't
just admit it,
reply.
or don't reply, or say, I'll
Yeah.
get back to you about that. You can
Yeah.
prompt it in that way. And so there's iterations of it, but it continues to work to this day really well. I think the next iteration is, okay, I can get you from here to here with AI. Can I get you from here to here with AI? Like if I can train it to have the first conversation and to take the first step, what about, someone that has just a general question about the enrollment process, like they've already committed, or they're wondering about, when does it start? When do I have to put the initial deposit down? Simple questions that could be answered kind of on the fly and immediate. I think that's the next iteration that I haven't installed yet.
Yeah. I think for folks listening, this is a particular use case that Cade is sharing, but as you're speaking, I'm thinking of one of the greatest challenges I used to have when I worked at a campus is like our admissions inbox, all these questions that come in that, are somewhere on the website, but the website's not great, so they're not finding it. That this is such an easy thing to implement, to just reply to those questions and, just feed it all your FAQ documents that you have and the information on your own website. But this is possible to do for anyone that's having to answer, that wants to do things fast at a personal level. So Cade, thank you for sharing this with us. I'm just blown away by what's possible with the technology that we all have available. That feels like magic, but it's there. It's ready for us. And everything that you shared today, just like you did, people can teach themselves, right? And implement themselves. But this is the extra for this episode. If you want help, Cade can do it for you through Enroll Boost AI. Do you want to talk to us about that just for a minute, Cade, and how folks can find you?
Like you said, Day, you can set this all up yourself. And it's available to us. But I can set it up for you if you just need someone to set it up for you.
Yeah.
And
well, and with that comes the advantage that your ChatGPT will not be cringe when you first start.
A refined prompt.
Because
yes.
Cade has learned how to make it not be cringe. So how can folks find out more about Enroll Boost AI?
Yep. enrollboostai.com is how you can get in touch with me and schedule a meeting. That happens a day or two after you click on the calendar link. But if you do, you may get to trial the AI.
Do you have an automated AI response?
I may have an automated AI response. And my AI self may or may not admit to it if you ask it. But no, it's just a cool way to demo the product if you want to. But enrollboostai.com. Or you can, I'm active on LinkedIn. So if you find me on LinkedIn, send me a DM and we can talk about what that could look like.
Yeah, well, excellent. Thank you so much. And that wraps up another episode, friends. Remember to keep walking the walk and talking the tactics. The Talking Tactics podcast is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions pros find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts, like Jamie Hunt, Allison Tercio, Jenny Lee Fowler, Jeremy Tiers, and so many of your other favorite leaders in higher ed too. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered, all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Check them out at element451.com.